Is Myanmar really on a path to democracy? Junta leader Min Aung Hlaing says so, but refuses to free Aung San Suu Kyi or accept ASEAN's 5-point peace plan. Still, completing an official visit to Thailand, are Myanmar's military leaders slowly being legitimized by their neighbors and the region? I'm Andrea Sankian. Today's newsmaker is Myanmar. They took power in a coup and were immediately relabeled a pariah state. In 2021, Myanmar's military junta overthrew the democratically elected Aung San Suu Kyi and her National League for Democracy. The takeover sparked a disastrous civil war, which still persists, as well as a regional and global rejection of the country's military regime. But last week, junta leader and now President Min Aung Hlaing paid an official visit to Thailand, a visit many activists criticized for attempting to legitimize an illegitimate leader. Now, while the general said he was working on national reconciliation, he later confirmed a refusal to release Aung San Suu Kyi and said ASEAN's special envoy to Myanmar is no longer needed. So, obviously, his claim that the country is on a path to democracy has left many in doubt. Here's a look.
More than 5 years after a military overthrow of its rulers, Myanmar is seeking to re-establish its international legitimacy and re-engage diplomatic links with its neighbours. Last week, its leader, Min Aung Hlaing, received a high-profile welcome during a visit to Thailand.
Myanmar has now re-established itself on the path to democracy and is moving toward a better future. As the new government, we have begun working on national stability, peace, and national reconciliation.
Min Aung Hlaing seized power in February 2021, overthrowing the elected government and arresting former leader Aung San Suu Kyi. The coup led to protests, a nationwide armed uprising, and the rise of ethnic armed groups and a growing resistance movement. In the civil war that followed, millions were displaced. The death toll is estimated to be as high as 100,000. Efforts by ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, to end the fighting largely failed. ASEAN agreed to a 5-point peace plan in 2021, calling for an end to violence and talks between opposing sides. But Myanmar's military has not made inroads to implement it. As a result, ASEAN has kept Myanmar in the cold in top-level summits. Between December 2025 and January 2026, Myanmar held a 3-phase election, but international observers regarded the election as being neither free nor fair, a sham to legitimize further military rule. Days before Min Aung Hlaing's visit, a Red Cross representative was allowed to meet his predecessor, Suu Kyi, who remains in detention since her overthrow.
I can confirm the meeting did take place, and my mother does appear to be in good health, but they didn't have a physician of their own present, so they weren't able to examine her themselves, but by all appearances she seems okay.
But she has not been seen by any foreign leader, although her son said he had spoken to her and confirmed that a meeting did take place. But Thailand, which shares an extensive land border with Myanmar, believes engaging with Myanmar again is the only way to help effect change, and wants to bring Myanmar back into the fold.
As a country's leader, I always believe that, regardless of the political situation domestically and internationally, the duty of a government is to ensure the well-being of its people, allowing them to live safely, securely, with jobs, income, and hope for the future. The economy must not be disrupted. Businesses must continue. This is what we aim for and hope to do together.
But this week, Myanmar's foreign ministry said it no longer felt the need for an ASEAN special envoy, just days after its successful summit with Bangkok. And efforts by ASEAN to get its special envoy to meet Suu Kyi have been rebuffed. Prior meetings with China, Laos, Russia, and now Thailand point to what look like Myanmar genuinely wanting to return to the world stage. But it still has a long way to go.
Joining me now to debate whether Myanmar is making headway toward legitimization are from Kent, UK, human rights activist and co-founder of the Free Burma Coalition, Maung Zarni. From Bangkok, director of the Asia Human Rights and Labor Advocates, Phil Robertson. And also from the Thai capital, international relations professor at Chulalongkorn University, Thitinan Pongsudhirak. Thank you all so much for being with me. We also, I have to mention, reached out to supporters of Myanmar's current leadership, and unfortunately, no one was able to reply for participation. So let me get started then. First with Thitinan, I need to ask you how you felt watching the Thai government welcome Min Aung Hlaing to Bangkok, especially in the way they did.
I think it's damaging to Thailand's foreign policy interests. I think we've seen Min Aung Hlaing being received in Delhi, in Beijing, even in Laos in July. And we have known that there's been a civil war after the coup. He seized power in February 2021 and really kind of stole an election that took place in 2020 in November. So all of this we've known. What we did not know is to what extent, how far Thailand would go in welcoming him and trying to normalize relations, bring him back into the ASEAN fold. I think this undermines not only Thailand's foreign policy interests, but also the ASEAN position. It's very hard for ASEAN to have a consensus on anything because there are 11 members. It's a consensus base. So they had this consensus on a 5-point provisions that Min Aung Hlaing signed on to in April 2021 to promote peace, dialogue, humanitarian assistance, release of political detainees, an ASEAN mediation, and inclusiveness of all the parties involved. But he reneged on it, he rejected it. But yet Thailand has gone head over heels to welcome him, to embrace him. So that's something that I was a little bit appalled by, and I think it's damaging to Thailand's foreign policy interests.
But Thitinan, Thailand isn't going to do this for nothing. So what is Bangkok trying to get out of improving relations here?
On the face of it, there are border security, and to be sure, Myanmar does, and Thailand, we do share a long 2,400 kilometer border with them. And we have migrant labor here. I mean, almost 10% of the Myanmar population resides and work in Thailand. We have drug trafficking, scam networks, river pollution, a lot of bilateral interests. But I think the issue here is that Thailand has conceded to Min Aung Hlaing without any reciprocity. So it could have been, it should have been the other way around, that we should have had some conditions in order to bring him back into the ASEAN fold, normalizing relations. He had to follow these conditions that he signed on to. But in fact, Thailand made concessions with the hope that there will be some reciprocity. But in fact, it's giving Min Aung Hlaing the upper hand unnecessarily.
Yeah. Let me ask Phil Robertson then, because I'm assuming you're on the same page as to why Thailand is doing this, contrary to ASEAN's stated policy on Myanmar. And then what are the consequences for ASEAN as well as for Myanmar's opposition?
I think that the situation is one where ASEAN's grip on the overall situation is starting to slip. You're having the Myanmar government coming out very strongly advocating for full re-engagement with ASEAN. They want to get their UN ambassador back, which is currently held by an opposition ambassador, someone who went over to the other side in the early days of the military coup. And I think that they're trying to break out of the isolation that they've faced since the military coup in February 2021. And in these areas, you used to have a real split in ASEAN between the maritime ASEANs led by Singapore, but also including the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia versus the Mekong ASEANs. That would be Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos. And Thailand was sort of in that camp and was playing as a bridge. But it seems now that Thailand has really gone all the way over to full re-engagement. And they're not going to get the sort of things that they expected from Myanmar. That's the reality. These bilateral issues that Titinan raised, they're very real. But we're already seeing Myanmar back away from some of these things. For instance, they've now said to Singapore that when they become the ASEAN chair in January 1st, 2027, that they don't need to send a special envoy on Myanmar to try to deal with the situation, that they won't be received. This reflects a new level of confidence from the Myanmar leader that somehow he has done it, that, you know, his ruse with this fake election, this sham election, is going to be accepted, and that he is going to no longer be seen as the military coup leader, but as, you know, some sort of civilian leader wearing a suit, when in fact, you know, he really is still the military. He is the face of the military in Myanmar.
Let me ask you this, though, Phil, because the Thai leader himself said that I'm quoting, the economy must not be disrupted, businesses must continue, that is what we aim and hope to do together. So, I mean, how much really is this about the economy?
Well, I think Prime Minister Anutin in Thailand is in a difficult situation. It's quite clear that the economy in Thailand is in the doldrums. There is no border trade with Cambodia. That border is entirely shut. And before that war with Cambodia, that was a $5 billion a year bilateral trade. And certainly trade across the border in Myanmar has declined over the years since the military coup in Myanmar. So I think part of this is also Anutin looking for some sort of boost from border trade to try to prop up particularly parts of the rural economy, you know, in the north, in the west part of the country. You know, it's a self-interested ploy, but also you have a lot of these big companies looking to profit from Myanmar. They're trying to get back in there. I mean, that conference that was held at the Queen Sirikit Center with the business leaders, there was over 700 business leaders there. It was a massive conclave. And this was a place where, you know, Min Aung Hlaing was given a red carpet treatment. And, you know, frankly, it was shameful.
Yeah. Titinan, I mean, that there are some pretty massive business interests at stake here. You've got not just the investments to protect, but some are saying that Thailand would also like to have some dibs on the resources that are available in Myanmar. Should the regime be legitimized, that if Thailand gains the favor now, they can, you know, pay it forward in a sense and get the favorite treatment that they see China as already having. Do you see that also at play here?
Well, no doubt there are economic interests involved, but, you know, there are also trade-offs involved. I mean, Myanmar still faces sanctions from a range of countries, and you know, doing business with Myanmar could make Thailand liable for secondary sanctions, Thai companies, Thai multinationals as well. And Thailand was already kind of securing, you know, it has a gas deal, it has some border trade already, and the border trade, by the way, is not really in full control of the military-backed government of Min Aung Hlaing, but it's under the ethnic armies, the Karen state, the Shan state, for example, Kayin state. So, you know, the argument that economic interests at play, certainly there is always at play, but I think that is significant but incidental. I think it's somehow something is going on in Thai policy, foreign policy, the highest corridors, that they want to normalize relations and put pressure on ASEAN. It could also has to do with China. I mean, China fully backs the military government in Myanmar. China was the one that really called the shots and told the ethnic armies to back off and really rescued Min Aung Hlaing from a very difficult situation faced in the civil war. So, I mean, there's some trade-offs. I mean, Thailand doing this, but in the longer term, in the overall net assessment, I'm not sure if we have more to gain than to lose because of the possible secondary sanctions, also undermining ASEAN. If ASEAN is not the agency that it can be for Thailand and other Southeast Asian countries, that's a big loss for Thailand.
Okay, I can bring in Maung Zarni at this point. Let me ask you this then. Whether in favor or not of Myanmar's military? And I know you're not. Was this visit to Thailand, in your opinion, a step on a path to reintegration into ASEAN, as well as globally, in huge part because the regime seems to be proving, at least for the near future, it's not really going anywhere?
Well, I don't think I can answer that question without putting the whole issue in the longer historical context. For two reasons. Number one, global context is deeply problematic. I live in UK, and the entire world of Western democracies are in deep trouble because we are heading towards a very authoritarian directions, whether in USA or Europe or UK. So in that regard, I don't think anyone has any, or I mean like any regime in the West or like states or societies have any moral authority to to tell the junta that they must not be part of the larger international community, especially given the fact that Israel has been the problem state for the entire international system, both law, courts, and global governing institutions. Number two, I think this is the conversation we've been having since Myanmar was fast-tracked in 1997 by Mahathir and Lee Kuan Yew, Fidel Ramos, and so we are speaking about the same topic, to engage or not to engage, to normalize or not to normalize. That's not to say that embracing the regime by the ASEAN is a good idea. But what I'm saying is that we are caught in this policy paradigm. There are only two choices: to engage or not engage. But meanwhile, the public is suffering, and we do not have in Myanmar a zero-sum scenario. And I partially hear Professor Titinam's the argument that it harms the Thai national or foreign policy interest. I mean, yes and no, because Thailand itself is not a democracy. I mean, he knows it better than any one of us does. And so I think I'm so torn because we keep having this conversation for almost 30 years now.
Okay. Let me come to Phil Robertson, because I did see you kind of smile or smirk there. And I think there is something really to be made of the fact that, international standards are effectively double standards across the board. And when you do see these Western so-called democracies who like to preach, these standards to other developing countries, it doesn't make a lot of sense anymore. And Myanmar's junta can definitely benefit from that, can it not?
Well, I think there's two parts of this. First of all, one of the reasons that a lot of the countries were pushing economic sanctions on Myanmar was because it was a military coup, and then there were serious rights abuses that were connected to that. Those rights abuses have been continuing. So the sanctions were put on for the right reason. That is, I think, very critical. Now, the second part of this is, does the European Union, the UK, France, Germany, the US, others, have the moral standing to raise sanctions against Myanmar? And my view is that yes, they do. I think that there are good reasons for doing this. I think that ultimately you want to pressure the Myanmar government to do better, to respect human rights. I think very important to understand what is being lost here by this Thailand initiative towards Myanmar. The whole discussion of the 5-point consensus, which was agreed in April 2021 with Min Aung Hlaing at the ASEAN leaders meeting in Indonesia. The core issues were reduction of violence, humanitarian assistance, release of political prisoners, and an inclusive dialogue towards peace. And now Min Aung Hlaing is claiming that there wasn't an agreement anyways, that he didn't go along with that agreement, and that it was just sort of an addendum to the ASEAN chair's statement. So what you're seeing is a real shift of the agenda, away from rights, reduction of violence, things that would help the Burmese people, to doing business with Burma, doing business with the military junta and that government.
Okay.
And that is a real paradigm shift. That's a problem.
Andrea, I'm sorry. I need to jump in because I 100% disagree with Phil's statement that Western states have a moral standing to call any part a cattle, or black. I mean, I live here. I lived in the U.S. for 17 years, and I left after the second invasion of Iraq by the United States. And I have lived more years in the West than in my own country. 37 years now in the West, and then 24 years in my own native country. We have a situation where Western states, key Western states, the US, UK, Germany, France, Italy, they are 100% collaborating with Israel in its genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, whatever you want to call it. I mean, this is not to defend the military. The military is at the ICJ facing the genocide case. What I'm saying is the moral bottom has fallen off our world order.
Okay, I mean, and that is, you made your point. That is understood. It's difficult to disagree with, just again, on the double standards that are applied, especially when we see what's happening in Israel and Gaza, for example. But let me come back to Thitinan. We're just down to our last 3 minutes. And I just have to ask you going forward, if you think Myanmar's regime will give any concessions whatsoever. Do you think they could eventually release Aung San Suu Kyi, that they might eventually accept the 5-point peace plan under ASEAN? Is there anything they'll do, or do they feel really particularly empowered because of what Maung Zarni was saying to not have to give anything?
Well, there are two things to that, Andrea. I mean, the short answer to your question is, you look at the question, right? I mean, Min Aung Hlaing somehow has the upper hand that he should not have. Morality, moral high ground aside, double standards, multiple standards aside, this is not about that. That's a point that is beside the point. The point here is that Myanmar had an opening of a decade of reform, progress, potential and promise, and it was unplugged by this coup, the Min Aung Hlaing-led coup in February 2021 that stole an election in November 2020. And then for the 5 years that we've seen, there was a civil war. More than 100,000 people, I mean, mostly Myanmar people who have nothing to do with the war, right, with the coup. The vast majority of the country, more than 100,000 have died, and the vast majority of the country hates Min Aung Hlaing. This man has no support inside Myanmar. Right? So it's not like the autocracy, authoritarian regimes or authoritarianism on the rise in the West. We're not talking about that. I mean, look, ASEAN had a document, a consensus. He agreed to it. He never abided by it. He rejected it now. And now he's showing bad faith. He's actually acting like a bully to ASEAN. This could really divide, undermine, and maybe fracture ASEAN, because Singapore will chair next year its 60th anniversary of ASEAN. And, we need to hold the ASEAN line, because without it, the whole region will be worse off. And Min Aung Hlaing, he must be really laughing, smiling over there, because he's got the upper hand that somehow we've given to him.
Yeah, Phil, go ahead.
Yeah, ASEAN doesn't have any credibility. That's the problem. You've got Min Aung Hlaing's got 3 biggest global powers backing him unconditionally: India, Russia, China. What can you do about that?
Well, look, I think that there is still a moral authority that has to be here. I mean, I think this guy is one of the worst rights abusers in Asia.
I agree,
full stop.
100%.
And there has to be accountability for that.
Warrant on him.
Yeah, I mean,
there has to be accountability.
Speaking, what can be done? ASEAN is, it doesn't have the leverage. ASEAN is internally divided itself, the 2-tier system. And internally divided ASEAN cannot confront Min Aung Hlaing, who has the backing unconditionally from 3 major powers. 2 are, the 2 most populous countries in Myanmar's neighborhood, right there.
Okay, Thitinan, go ahead. Final minute.
That's a fuzzy and slippery logic. Because if you say China and Russia back Myanmar, Min Aung Hlaing, therefore we have to budge and buckle.
I mean, we're talking about
That's a very
majority
bad
of the
logic.
populations in the world.
Yeah.
Look, I think that ASEAN has a line, has a consensus. You ask Singapore, Timor-Leste,
Yes.
even Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines chairing. So I think that the issue here is not about it's either or. There has to be concessions from Min Aung Hlaing in order for him to be dealt with by ASEAN member states.
Okay.
I agree.
Gentlemen, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. I would love to continue this discussion. Truly fascinating, but we are completely out of time. For this edition of the Newsmakers, I'd like to thank all three of you sincerely so much for being with me, our viewers for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.